Good morning. First of all, I'd like to just thank all of you for just being here. It's one of the first things advocates do is you show up, and so you've done that very well. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here and to share stories with you about Golda Meir. And again, thank you to the staff for planning this event. It's huge. And I also was very touched by the fact that it has a twofold purpose for you. It's not only to inform, but also to inspire you. And as an advocate, you need to be inspired. It's not just your academic information. Both aspects, speaking from the head and the heart, they're imperative for the message. And this duality is what made Golda effective as an advocate for her people to the world. A couple of points before we start. I didn't write about Golda because I'm Jewish. I'm not. I wrote about Golda because she is a noble person who stands for justice. And it's my personal advocacy to make sure people know these stories and to know the stories of Golda, which means also then they'll know the stories of the Jewish people. And I didn't write any of my biographies because the world needed more academic information about Eleanor Roosevelt, Golda Meir, or Marie Curie. I wrote these books and I give these presentations because we do need these stories, stories that are relevant to our lives and that inspire our own journey. And so, because that was always my question, it's probably always your question as you're in school. You're the ones that raise your hand and say, why do I need to know this? Because if you don't need to know it, guess what? You don't need to know it. It's not important. So why do we need to know about Golda? Golda Meir has the characteristics and the traits of being an advocate. So that's what we're going to talk about today and this morning in these next few minutes. As an advocate, Golda is fierce and she is passionate. Even as a 4-year-old, she starts out with in Kiev, her and her family are in Kiev. There's a mob, it's at nighttime, there's a mob coming down the street. It's going to be a pogrom. And she's standing at the top of the stairs. She's just a little kid. She's standing at the top of the stairs, holding hands with a friend and looking down at the front door, down at the bottom of the stairs. And she's looking at her dad and the other dad. And they're busy hammering a board across the back of the door, hoping that's going to be enough to keep this mob from banging in and maybe murdering them, destroying their home, who knows what, right? And Golda, you would think, she's a 4-year-old, you would think that maybe she's just afraid. No, Golda's not. Golda is mad. She's mad. And she writes about that time later on in her life. She writes, if there is any explanation necessary for the direction which my life has taken, perhaps it is the desire and the determination to save Jewish children from a similar scene and from a similar experience. That right there is the beginning, even as a 4-year-old, that she sees this sense of mission and advocacy. Also, as an advocate, it can't always just be all talk. It's got to be where you're not only aware of the problem, but that you do something about it. And my heavens, I mean, we've only got, a half hour or so today. I could spend the rest of this whole 8-hour day filling you with stories of what Golda would do. You don't put a problem in front of Golda and expect it not to get taken care of. She does something. So here she is. She's now, her and her family, they immigrate to Milwaukee. And again, her family is not the intelligentsia. They don't come from a wealthy family or a big name or anything. So it's not like Golda has a mother that's saying, go girl, and really encouraging her. She doesn't, all right? They're just nice, quiet family. But Golda looks around at her school and she sees that not all the kids have books at the school. She's 11. She looks around, she sees this, and so she decides, somebody needs to do something about this because the school's supposed to provide all the money for the books. They don't have enough money. The families are supposed to kick in the balance. They don't have enough money. So now there's this gap, and you've got kids that don't have enough books. So what Golda does, again, she's pragmatic. She does something about this. And she then decides, we're going to have a fundraiser. If Golda was nowadays, she would be all over GoFundMe. I mean, she would do crowdsourcing all the time. But she's not. So she gets a hall. She finds out where there's a hall they can use. She has a group of friends and everything. And she finds out, okay. Well, what she starts is the American Young Sisters Society. She starts this little group and she goes, oh, wait, we know you can sing. We're going to have you sing. Oh, you play the piano. You're going to play the piano. You read poetry. We're going to have you read poetry. And then they're all out there just selling tickets to raise money. And they put on a program. And this is what she does. They then raise money for books. Now you can think that's a really small thing. You're right, it is. It starts small. But then this is going to be the same Golda who then goes on to become the labor minister of Israel. And what's she in charge of? She's in charge, one of the things is education. And you can bet every one of those kids has books. So you've gone from being an 11-year-old getting enough books for some grade school kids to now being the labor minister and in charge of education. So it's not just talking all the time, it's then doing. One of the other things that Golda has as an advocate is she has zero tolerance. Zero tolerance for injustice. And that's not even just for her people, but for any people. So here's one of the things that she would do, even again as a young person. She's like a junior high age person. And a friend comes to her and says, Golda, I was on my way to school today and a little boy threw a penny at my feet. And then the little boy told me, and then he told me, pick it up. So the little girl picked it up. And then the little boy says to her, a dirty Jew will always pick up a penny. Well, you just told Golda, and Golda will always do something. So she gets together her group of friends, and she goes and stands in front of that boy's house as a sign of protest. She does something about it. And I've had people, when I relay this story, I've had people say to me, well, you know, what difference does it make? Maybe it didn't make any difference. That boy, you're right. That boy could have stayed just as stupid as he was that day for the rest of his life, for all we know. The parents could have stayed just as stupid as they are the rest of their life, for all we know. But here's where it makes a difference. In your zero tolerance, in your doing something at any scale, at any level, is this Golda who then says, I won't tolerate this and will stand up for this. This is the same Golda who then goes on to confront the British Empire. She's the same Golda that goes on and stands before the UN. You just don't wake up one morning and go, oh, I think I'll stand up to the British Empire today. No, y'all have been doing that then for a long time before then this is so built into you that yes, you can take on the bigger things. One of the other things then you have to realize too is for an advocate, you have to be patient about the outcomes. You don't know what the outcomes are going to be, and you don't know how long it's going to take. Golda remembers when she was in grade school in Milwaukee. She remembers studying American history, and she writes, when I studied American history as a schoolgirl, and I read about those who signed the Declaration of Independence, that would have been for the United States, right? She says, I couldn't imagine these were real people doing something real. So this is her as a little kid. She remembers back, and then she goes on to now know, like over 40 years later though, and there I was sitting down and signing a Declaration of Independence, and it's for Israel. She's a signer of their Declaration of Independence. And yet here she is as a little kid just sitting there in a grade school going, wow, what would it be like to do something so real, something so big? And it's like in her heart. So again, it's just so relevant for any of you that what's in your heart, what's going on right now, what you want to advocate for. Oh heavens, trust me. There's on the back of the book and on the bookmark, there's my email address, right? There's my phone number even here. I'm telling you, anybody and wherever you all go, I expect to someday hear from some of you in this audience today going, excuse me, Ann Atkins, do you remember I was in that class that day and now this is what's happened in my life? You know, you're not going to be signing a Declaration of Independence for Israel. That's already been done. But there will be other things that you do. You just don't know how long it's going to take. Please be patient. One of the other things then too is there was for Golda certainly, and there will be for you. There is an evolution of your purpose. Golda does not start out as a Zionist. All right. She really, when she's growing up in Milwaukee and she's still just a young teenager and everything, what she's doing is just raising money for the Jewish National Fund. And she kind of thinks, all right, that's my role in life. That's what I'm going to do. She is not a Zionist. But here's now her turning point in this evolution, and it's a harsh, sharp turning point for her. She then, as she's been raising money, and as you know, Some of this money then is not only sent and bought, used to buy land and everything, which at the time is the Ottoman Empire. It's used then, it's sent back to towns in Russia and things where they need money to rebuild, say, after a pogrom. Some of this money is sent back to her hometown in Pinsk, Russia, where she grew up before then moving to Milwaukee. So you can imagine, she's like, wow, this is really relevant. This is important. I'm doing something that's directly affecting even my hometown back in Russia. This is what she finds out, though. She finds out that the 40 men that received this money are taken and they're lined up along a wall. And this is a wall that Golda would have known of as a child, that she walked by as a little girl. They're lined up along that wall simply for taking the money from the Jewish National Fund. The Russian authorities find them and they're all shot. This now is a major turning point in the evolution of Golda. She now is a Zionist because she realizes that until we have a country, until we have a government that will protect us as a people, this will always happen. She now is a Zionist. This is her evolution where she will never turn back from that. And there isn't a day that she's not thinking, how can I make this country happen? The other thing, as I mentioned to you right from the get-go, a sign of being an advocate is you just show up. And you show up sometimes when it's not convenient. You show up when it's a hard thing to do, but you just show up. There's a couple times then for Golda that were difficult. During, right after World War II and everything, you know, there's that gap. The war ends in 45. Israel's not Israel till 48. Well, what were all the Jewish people supposed to do that are trying to now get out of Europe? Where were they supposed to go? They were being held in deportation camps, one of them being on the island of Cyprus. The British were holding them there. And it was not easy. Yes, they weren't being gassed every day, but it was still a difficult life. Golda, who is now still in the Palestine Mandate, she realizes, oh my heavens, look, there's children in these camps that have never seen the outside of barbed wire. There's children in these camps that are suffering and they have ill health, and that's our next generation. We need to get them out. So Golda decides, this is a matter of showing up. Golda decides, I'm going to go to the camp and I'm going to meet with these people. Now, how this was already set up, though, is let's just say here, we'll start at this end. You've been in the camp the longest, so the next time there's numbers that are available for you to leave, you'll be next, you'll be next, you'll be next, you'll be next. You see it goes on down. First come in, the first one's now to be on your way out. Golda's going to come to you, and she's going to be asking the people that are next in line to go out. And remember, there's no Israel yet. There's no promise of an Israel yet. There has been no UN vote yet that there will be an Israel. So all those people in that camp, for all they know, they might be there forever. They have no trust in the world that the world's ever going to do anything to help them get out of there. But Golda goes and she says to these first people coming that have the next chance to get out, wait a minute, there's children, and there are children that have a number that they may not get out for a long time. We want to give the children your number to go out next. Would you give up your chance, please? And not only for that child, but any family that is with the child, they get to take up those numbers too. Golda's got to go and tell them that. You know, nobody even within the Jewish community back in the Palestine Mandate, David Ben-Gurion and everybody, they wouldn't even go with Golda because that was such a hard message to go and ask somebody to give up your chance. Golda went, she asked those people to please give up your chance. And you know what? Every one of them said yes. If there's ever a matter to be proud, oh my gosh, they said yes. And again, it's not like Golda could stand there and say, don't worry, there'll be an Israel in another 3 months. There's no clue there'll still be an Israel yet. But they believed in her. Golda promised them. She said, there will be an Israel, though. And she was right. But they believed in her. She showed up to give that message. Now, here's what's beautiful about history, and the full story of that is there'll be times later then, and this will be the beauty of your advocacy when you see the full circle come around and why what your work is doing is so worth it. Because Golda will be walking down the streets of Jerusalem at times, and she'll have a mother come up to her and say, look, I want you to meet my daughter. She's the one that you got out of the camp. Can you imagine? It'd be like, Golda, that's like, makes the whole trip worth it. That was so worth it because, look, this child is alive. This child has had a better life because of what she did. Other times where she showed up then too, even once they become in Israel. There's times where there has to be an unemployment tax. And so it's Golda, because she's labor minister, that must go to the factories and explain to the factory workers why there is this now a tax for to pay for unemployment. And that unemployment will also go to the Arabs. Now that's a tough sell. And yet it was Golda that would go and do that, because she knew, I'm the one with that moral authority that could sell that message, and that is what's going to be right. And that's what she did. One of the other things too, and this goes back to our original point at the beginning, where not only is it things within your heart but things within your head to know, is then that leads to your credibility, that when you are advocating you have to have credible information. And this again was something that Golda could do. She was the best speaker, where she could always speak from her heart, and yet then she could then always weave in all of the credible information, the facts, the academic stuff. That was a great combination, and so she needed credibility. One of the other characteristics then is Golda would use humor, because she was funny. She would say to reporters at one time, she says, I understand the Arabs wanting to wipe us out, but do they really expect us to cooperate? She would tell King Abdullah, who she went to see before Israel was declaring itself a nation. She tried to coordinate that maybe the Jordanians wouldn't invade too and everything. So she goes to see the king, and he says, what's the hurry? Why don't you just wait before you declare? Don't use, May 14th, 1948. Just wait. What's the hurry? And she looks at him and she says, we've been waiting for 2,000 years. Is that hurrying? Yeah, because now it's just the point. You're not getting into a big argument about everything. Just make the point, and it can be funny, because then once you make somebody laugh, you got them. When Kissinger, and he's been over there making deals with the Egyptians and everything, and so he comes to Golda, and Golda's giving him a bit of the cold shoulder. And Kissinger looks at her and he says, I go to Egypt and they greet me warmly and they hug me. I come here and I get the cold shoulder from you, Golda. And Golda looks at him and says, well, if you gave me the deals that you're giving the Egyptians, I'd give you a hug too. She's very witty. So for any of us, though, we're not going to be talking to Kissinger, and we're not going to be visiting DP camps, but I do encourage you to know these stories, stories of Golda, that will fuel your own fire, because in your own evolution, in your future ahead of you, when setbacks come, that you know how Golda handled it. You know that, oh, this is what happens. This is what happens to people that are advocates. That say that Golda's feelings of anguish over the setback of when she had to see the Israeli athletes in Munich, and that they were murdered. This was a horrible time. And yet this was a setback for her, and how she handled it. That when, even too, for you as advocates, when you then would be tempted to have bitterness, and trust me, you'll have lots of reasons to be bitter about things, and that can hold you back from making that higher choice, that you would remember, no, don't give in to bitterness. If Golda Meir can stand there and shake the hand of the West German ambassador just 25 years after the Holocaust and not be bitter, then I'm not so sure what any of us would ever have an excuse to justify our bitterness over. We don't. And this is, for her, she sets the standard. There's times, too, that we'll be very tired. You might be tired now. Amanda didn't have any sleep last night. I know she's tired. But keep in mind, Golda would work 14, 16-hour days. And even then, this was like, say, right during the war. And so she would go home to her apartment. Her balcony looked out over the Mediterranean. She would see the signals of ships coming in that were European Jews that were escaping out of Europe and everything. So they were coming to be hidden now in safe homes. Golda, here she is. She's just been working a 14, 16-hour day. She's out there all night helping these people off the ships and into safe homes to hide them. It didn't matter how tired she was. It won't matter how tired we are. There's work to be done. There's another point too that we can start seeping in is sometimes with the work that we do, with everything that is on our plate, we can say that there's sometimes maybe a bit of arrogance that can seep in. There's a times where a bit of false humility can seep in. And let me tell you what Golda would say, and it's a really famous quote of hers. Golda would tell people, "Don't be so humble. You're not that great." And I think it's just such a great reminder for us. It just knocks us down that peg or two because we need to be knocked down a peg or two once in a while, all of us. And here is a final attribute of her character, which I think is the most difficult, and so I've saved it for last, is acceptance. Golda sets the standard for our acceptance. I'm not going to say the word forgiveness because that has too much connotations with it, but we must learn to accept what has happened. And she accepts this and sets the standard for all of us to this day, let alone for her people at the time here. Again, we go back to West Germany, who then has sent a request to start diplomatic relations with Israel. Again, it's just 25 years after the Holocaust. Golda, because she accepts, this is what's happened, but we move on. And so they did. And because Golda said yes to that there would be a West German ambassador. And I'm telling you, there were thousands of people in Israel that were not happy with that decision. But she said, yes, we must. That she would then meet with Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England. Are you kidding? Those stupid British people, they're the ones that caused the death of thousands of their people, of Golda's people. They caused the undermining of Israel being able to become a nation. There's all kinds of reasons she could have not accepted Margaret Thatcher. Excuse me, if I was a lesser person, I would have wanted to slap her. But Golda doesn't. She accepts them. It's what's happened, but we move on. It's brilliant. Golda. Here's the epitome. Golda even meets with Sadat from Egypt. Sadat who has caused wars. Sadat who Golda knows women that are widows now for the rest of their lives because of this man. Golda knows children that never had fathers for the rest of their lives because of this man. And yet at one point, Sadat says, yes, I'll come to Israel and there's going to be a state visit. And she goes and she greets him. She sits and has dinner with him. And they joke. There's lots of funny things they say back and forth because they were both witty. But the point here is she accepts. This is what happens. It's in the past. We move forward. She constantly had this vision of the future. And she sets the standard not for her time even, but for us even today. Golda's decisions to follow the North Star of justice, they lead to this amazing destiny then, where she does become one of the founding fathers of Israel. She becomes the Minister of Labor. She becomes the Foreign Minister. She then, of course, becomes even the Prime Minister. And again, you see, though, where it's an evolution of her character and her abilities. I would like to, again, thank you for your attendance here today because it indicates that you've made a decision to also be an advocate for Zionism. How this will play out for each one of you will be your own personal journey and story. Even the scale of it and the impact. But I do ask two things then, that you would take with you stories. There's stories in this book. It's predominantly, that's why I wrote the book. Because the stories will help you share with other people and help them understand. Stories will. But also, the stories, please, to let them fuel your own fire. That there are times when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when you feel lost and frustrated, that these stories will fuel your own fire to keep on. As you move forward in the journey of your life, here's a final Golda quote for you. One of the things she said, it's brilliant. She says, "To be or not to be is not a question of compromise. You either be or you don't be. That's Golda. Thank you. I'm certainly here for a while. Then, if any of you had any questions, I think we've got time for that. I wanted to, yeah. So, does anybody have questions or comments or yes? Yeah, my first book was. Oh, sure. She was asking me what made me want to write about Golda over other people, and there's lots of other choices. Yeah, my first person was Eleanor Roosevelt, and I realized one, the heart of it. There's 2 points, just like what we talked about. The heart of it is I saw that picture of Golda. I was so captivated by it. Honest, it was a spiritual thing where I just knew I've got to write this woman's story. Um, Two, though, I also knew because of studying about Eleanor, they would meet for lunch in New York City when Golda was back here for a fundraiser. And I just so wished I could have been their waitress. Can you imagine Eleanor Roosevelt and Golda Meir sitting there having lunch together? My heavens, what would they talk about? But so it was a combination, because then when I write about Golda in the Eleanor book just to give her some background. So that also was what sparked my interest too. But it truly was this picture. Yes. What made me choose the title True Grit? Because I really wanted something very succinct and tight that was, excuse me, that was kind of kick-ass. You know, so True Grit is that, isn't it? It's like boom. It's just it gets you. Don't, and that's Golda. I mean, it's like so succinctly Golda. Just there's grit there. Don't mess with her. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. The fact she never wanted to be one. Golda makes it very, very clear that she never had any aspirations to be anything except to, when she first came to the Palestine Mandate, to work on a kibbutz. Other than that, it was constantly her decisions. And the purity of her decisions to just do justice is what made her remarkable as a politician, because she would stand up to even her own people if it somehow, okay, like even after Israel becomes a nation, and there's, obviously thousands of Jewish immigrants coming from all over the world. I can't imagine, sometimes 2,000 a day pouring into something the size of New Jersey. The logistics would be mind-boggling. And some of the Jewish people there in Israel were saying, whoa, whoa, maybe we should, this right of return, maybe we should put limits on it. And she just would say no. And so that to me was what made her so powerful as a politician. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure. And I wish you all just the very best.